Beneath the soaring dome of St. Peter's, under layers of marble and frescoed ceilings, lies a labyrinth of corridors and vaults that most pilgrims never glimpse. These hidden chambers, collectively known as the Vatican Apostolic Archives, are the beating heart of centuries of documentation, a vast repository of the Church's triumphs, failures, and unspoken mysteries. Yet the popular moniker Vatican Secret Archives only scratches the surface. The Latin designation, Archivum Secretum Vaticanum, hints not at conspiracy but at privileged access. Archives reserved for those who serve at the highest levels of the Roman Curia. The secrecy has drawn countless legends-whispered tales of Gnostic Gospels locked away, papal correspondences detailing hidden alliances, and artifacts of otherworldly provenance stashed behind iron gates. Long before the modern era, church leaders understood that information was a form of power. In the tumult of medieval Europe, where heresy sprang like weeds in spring, the popes amassed documents to defend orthodoxy, to track dissent, and to shape the narrative of Christendom. Innocent IV in the 13th century commissioned the collection of inquisitorial records, gathering accounts of witches and heretics into thick ledgers that would remain hidden from public view. Generations later, Paul VI orchestrated the recataloguing of the archives, sealing whole chambers under new keys and issuing a decree that forbade unauthorized entry. The motive was not always suppression of scandalous truths. Often, it was simply to preserve fragile parchments from the damp corridors and curious hands that might damage them. Yet every new restriction deepened the aura of mystery. The archives span over 12 centuries of papal history: bulls from Gregory the Great, letters from Catherine of Siena, and trade accords with kings of Europe. They hold manuscripts on theology and philosophy, records of voyages to the New World, and secret instructions exchanged with monarchs who sought the Pope's blessing or censure. For every codex displayed in the Vatican Library, there are dozens more gathering dust behind locked doors. Researchers who petition for access must present impeccable credentials and await approval that can take years. Even when granted, they find themselves escorted through unlit corridors, passing behind rusted iron gates into rooms where the only sound is the rustle of vellum as they carefully turn pages that have not seen daylight in centuries. Among the most tantalizing rumors are those of Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the infamous list of banned books that the Church maintained from the mid-16th century until 1966. While copies of the index itself are well known, whispers persist that the Vatican archives safeguard the original drafts, the annotations, and marginalia of censors who grappled with works by Galileo, Machiavelli, and other thinkers deemed dangerous. These marginal notes, some scholars speculate, reveal a far more nuanced debate within the Curia than the Church ever publicized. Did dissenting cardinals argue for a softer stance? Were there synods whose records were quietly expunged when they threatened the official line? The answers may lie in narrow, half-lit aisles of vellum and leather that only a privileged few have run their fingers across. But the archives do more than hoard inconvenient histories. They also protect texts so sacred that they must be shielded even from most clerics. The Anastasis Codex, a collection of early liturgical rites predating the Nicene Council, is said to contain variant prayers that fell out of use, texts that might reshape our understanding of early Christian worship if ever released. And then there is the whispered legend of the Ptolemaic cipher scroll, a Greco-Latin treatise on astrological correspondences and sacred measurements, rumored to have been given to the Church by Byzantine scholars in the 5th century. Its contents geometries linking the movement of the stars to the rhythms of the Massare, said to have inspired Michelangelo's design of the Sistine Chapel's dome. If such a document exists, it remains under triple lock, its keys held by the Secretary of State, the prefect of the archives, and the Pope himself. In recent decades, pressure has mounted for transparency. Historians, theologians, and even some within the Church have called for selective openings, digital preservation, scholarly editions, or scheduled viewings to allow the world to see how past decisions shaped the present. Pope Benedict XVI tentative steps, granting limited access to certain Renaissance-era materials, only to see scholars clamoring for more. His successor extended the permissions, yet the oldest and most sensitive documents remain off-limits. The tension between preservation and revelation continues to define the archive's ethos. Long before the papal throne commanded the spiritual destiny of Europe, there thrived a multitude of early Christian communities, each with its own scriptures, rituals, and visions of the divine. At the heart of many of these were alternative accounts of Jesus' life and teachings, texts now collectively known as the Gnostic Gospels. These writings, attributed to figures such as Thomas, Mary Magdalene, Philip, and Judas, offered startlingly different portraits of Christ, secret dialogues revealing hidden wisdom, instructions for inner awakening, and theological mysteries at odds with the later, universalizing orthodoxy. Yet by the 4th century, as the Council of Nicaea forged the first imperial creed, these Gospels found themselves cast outside the circle. The process of suppression was neither swift nor uniform. Early bishops and theologians Ambrose, Athanasius, and Jerome debated which books bore apostolic authority and which threatened the unity of belief. The Nag Hammadi Library, unearthed in 1945, preserved dozens of these contested texts in Coptic translation, buried in sealed jars under the desert sands. Within those pages lay the Gospel of Thomas's enigmatic sayings, the Gospel of Mary's radical vision of feminine leadership, and the Gospel of Judas's portrayal of betrayal as an act of spiritual obedience. Yet these revelations never reached the halls of power in Rome. Instead, scribes and synods quietly expunged references to them from canonical lists, and the Vatican's archivist centuries later ensured that any surviving manuscripts remained hidden from popular view. Why such care to bury and protect? The Gnostic Gospels spoke of a secret path to union with the divine spark within, returned to a primordial realm beyond flesh and form. They emphasized personal, direct experience of the light rather than obedience to ecclesiastical hierarchy. In the hands of a burgeoning church keen to consolidate authority, these texts presented not mere theological dissent, but a profound challenge to the very structure of power. Legends persist that early popes ordered the destruction of Gnostic codices or locked them away in private vaults. Even today, scholars speculate that fragments of these writings reside in the Vatican's restricted collections, cataloged under arcane shelf marks, accessible only to those granted the highest privilege. The Council of Nicaea in 325 CE codified the formula of belief that would become the Nicene Creed, and with it, laid the foundations of Orthodox Christology. Books that contradicted the Creed's portrayal of Christ's nature were deemed heretical, their authors branded as enemies of the faith. Yet the urgency to control Scripture was as much political as spiritual. A unified canon strengthened the emperor's alliance with the Bishop of Rome, forging a single voice across the empire. In subsequent centuries, formal lists of prohibited books, the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, would sweep away any vestige of dangerous writings, from Copernicus to Curie. But its roots lay in the early silencing of the Gnostic texts. Despite the official bans, seekers and mystics preserved hidden copies, passing them clandestinely from hand to hand. Secret study groups in medieval Europe whispered about the lost sayings of Christ and the secret dialogues with Mary. During the Renaissance, Humanists rediscovered references to the Gospel of Thomas in patristic writings, inciting fresh interest in the spark of mystical Christianity that lay dormant beneath scholastic theology. Yet, as swiftly as these texts re-emerged, the Church responded with censure. Censored editions were burned, scholars persecuted, and libraries raided. Today, the Vatican Apostolic Library holds over 80,000 codices, but it refuses to confirm which, if any, Gnostic texts it shelters. Requests by independent researchers to view specific catalog entries are routinely denied, even when the manuscripts in question are known to exist elsewhere. The Vatican's posture is guarded, a tacit acknowledgement that these writings, if unleashed, could upend modern assumptions about the origins of Christian doctrine, reopen disputes over scriptural authority, and lend new urgency to spiritual paths that emphasize inner revelation over external command. Yet the story of the forbidden Gospels endures. Digital Humanities projects worldwide race to transcribe and translate every Gnostic fragment, while theological conferences debate what these texts reveal about the diversity of early Christianity. Readers drawn to the Gnostic vision speak of a faith suffused with wonder, a way of knowing Christ as the interior teacher, rather than an external Lord. For them, the true scandal is not that the Vatican concealed these treasures, but that it still guards the locks so tightly, reminding us that the hidden vaults beneath St. Peter's may hold not only the power of emperors and popes, but the forgotten keys to direct communion with the divine. Beyond the realm of forbidden manuscripts, the Vatican guards a treasury of objects whose very materiality pulses with legend and power. These are not mere antiquities displayed behind glass cases, but artifacts vested with the weight of faith, myth, and the unspoken interplay between the sacred and the arcane. In hidden chapel vaults and under floorboards of ancient sacristies, one finds vessels and relics said to embody divine presence, or in more unsettling whisper-sharness, occult forces. Consider first the legend of the Holy Grail. While Protestant imaginations roamed medieval France in search of a chalice at Montségur, the Roman Church quietly claimed its own Grail relics, cups purportedly used at the Last Supper or in Joseph of Arimathea's care. These chalices, fashioned of gold or carved from agate, bear inscriptions in archaic Greek and Syriac text fragments that, if pieced together, might reveal alternate liturgies or secret prayers long suppressed. The Grail's power, tradition holds, was not simply to contain sacramental wine, but to channel the living blood of Christ, a conduit of healing light. Was there a time when the popes themselves drank from such a vessel, believing its archaic enchantment would confer wisdom or divine favor? The records are maddeningly silent, and any surviving cup is locked within a steel and oak reliquary whose key rests only in the hands of the prefect of the papal sacristy. Then there are the relics of saints' bones, garments, even personal effects venerated for their proximity to holiness. Yet some relics carry a darker reputation. The skull of Saint Valentine, for example, housed in Rome's Church of Santa Maria in Cosmedin, is said to exude a subtle fragrance on the feast day of the 14th of February, a miraculous sign to brides and lovers. But in the Vatican's inner repositories, fragments of that very skull reputedly vanish on occasion, spirited away for private veneration by conclave cardinals seeking blessings of fertility or heart's desire. More ominous is the spear of destiny lance that pierced Christ's side, entrusted to popes through antiquity as a guarantor of imperial power. According to occult lore, the mere possession of this iron rod shapes the fortunes of nations. During World War II, Adolf Hitler's obsession with the spear underscores its lethal pedigree. Yet, theologians argue that the Church's own reticence to expose its exact location speaks to anxious awareness of its potential for seduction. Within the Vatican's secret collections are also objects far removed from the Gospels: emerald tablets of Hermetic lore, small metal plates etched with cryptic sigils, and instructions for alchemical transmutation. These artifacts, said to date back to Byzantine envoys from Alexandria, bear inscriptions in Greek and Coptic warning of the perils of uninitiated meddling explicit recipes for dissolving base metals into philosophical gold. These tablets are often stored under lead-lined chests to guard against lethal emanations of mercury vapor, suggesting that their magic may once have been as material as it was spiritual. Another class of hidden treasure comprises papal private collections of astrological charts and pigment recipes. Paintings by Michelangelo and Raphael owe their brilliance not only to artistic genius, but to secret formulas for ground lapis and cinnabar, recipes jealously guarded by Renaissance pontiffs whose patronage financed expeditions to procure rare minerals. Intimate notebooks extracted during the sack of Rome and later recovered list planetary correspondences believed to influence key church decisions: which day to consecrate a bishop, when to launch a crusade, or how to interpret omens of comets crossing the sky. Some of these manuscripts survive only in fragmentary form, their pages repurposed as bindings for other documents hiding layers of celestial code beneath more pedestrian texts. What binds these occult objects together is their ambiguous power, a power the Church has alternately embraced, sanitized, or concealed. Are they holy instruments, conduits of divine grace, or dangerous talismans whose misuse could fracture the boundary between creation and chaos? The Vatican's unwillingness to fully catalog or exhibit these relics suggests an unease with their mythic potency. To preserve them is to acknowledge a dimension of faith that lies beyond doctrinal realm, where material substance and spiritual force converge, where the miraculous and the magical overlap. And so, beneath the polished mosaics and the orchestral swell of incense, the Church maintains its wooden chests and steel vaults, each lock a guardian of stories that refuse easy categorization. In the interplay of light and shadow, brass and bone, ink and blood, the Vatican's occult objects stand as silent witnesses to a truth both wondrous and terrifying: that faith, at its furthest edge, always flirts with the arcane. Even as the public liturgies of the Vatican fill St. Peter's with incense and hymn, another layer of rites unfolds behind closed-door ancient ceremonies, rooted in the same soil of Western Christendom, yet touched by arcane currents. These are the rituals in the shadows, the rites so secret that their existence is attested only by fragmentary manuscripts, hushed testimonies, and the faintest echoes among the curia. One such practice is the Pope's private liturgy, a daily mass celebrated in near silence, attended by a handful of prelates who, like custodians of a covenant, recite prayers in low tones, invoking patron saints unknown to most faithful. These rites, recorded in parchments bound in black goatskin, call upon ancient intercessors, patrons of plague-stricken cities, or custodians of hidden wisdom whose names were deliberately expunged from later ritual books. Their vestments are embroidered with cryptic symbols, interlaced crosses and spirals reminiscent of pre-Christian labyrinths, reminding participants that the path of faith winds through layers of human history far older than Rome. Behind the austere facade of exorcism manuals lies another secret realm, the Vatican's Demonologia Romana, compendium of invocations and counter-invocations compiled through the centuries by papal exorcists. Unlike the published Ritual Romanum, which offers standardized prayers for casting out evil, these hidden manuscripts detail rituals for confronting specific spirits' incarnations of pride, despair, and forbidden knowledge. Each rite demands not only the proper words, but precise timings, fasting cycles tied to lunar phases, incantations whispered into consecrated water, and offerings of fragrant oils distilled from rare resins. A misstep could invite the very presence one sought to banish, a fact that led to several incidents in the Renaissance when inexperienced exorcists vanished into uncharted night. Even more veiled is the legend of the Black Massa ceremonial inversion, said to have been performed in secret by dissident clergy and sorcerers who believed that by inverting Christian symbols they could glimpse the divine from the opposite side. While there is no official record in Vatican files, memoirs of condemned heretics recount clandestine gatherings in deserted crypts where altars faced the floor, chalices held water instead of wine, and prayers were recited backward to shatter the barriers between worlds. Whether these rites ever occurred within Rome's walls or only in the shadowlands beyond its jurisdiction remains debated among scholars. The Church's silence on the matter, combined with the sudden disappearances of inquisitors who investigated such claims, has only fueled speculation that the Vatican itself may have surveilled or even experimented with these dark ceremonies. Within the vaults of the Lateran Palace, a handful of ritual books survive that date to the late Middle Ages, detailed instructions for ceremonies invoking angels of protection over the city, and complementary rituals to summon infernal guardians against invaders. These rites blur the lines between magic and statecraft, revealing a church that saw no contradiction in turning to divine and demonic powers alike to safeguard its earthly domain. Bound in iron-reinforced chest, these codices were deemed too dangerous, even for most cardinals, a testament to the Vatican's willingness to wield the arcane arts in times of crisis. Throughout these shadow rituals runs a single thread: the understanding that spiritual authority extends beyond the altar rails and pulpit. It penetrates the hidden geometries of the soul, where symbols become gates and words become keys. The Vatican's clandestine ceremonies affirm that the sacred and the secret share a common root: the conviction that true power lies in those rites which are forbidden to the uninitiated. And so, while pilgrims stand in awe beneath the painted frescoes of the Sistine Chapel, another drama plays out in silent corridors, where candles gutter against stone walls and ancient psalms reverberate like distant thunder. In these shadows, the Church maintains its oldest pact, to guard not only the light of faith, but the mysteries of the night, ensuring that the threshold between heaven and hell remains under papal watch, even as the world above remains blissfully unaware. Behind the ornate facade of papal justice lies a far darker ledger, a collection of testimonies, interrogations, and judgments that chart the Church's single-minded campaign against heresy. These are the Inquisition files, vaults of human anguish and theological zeal, preserved in secret archives beneath Rome's cobblestones. Initiated in the 13th century, the Papal Inquisition was conceived not merely as a judicial body, but as a spiritual scourge, tasked with purging error from Christendom's body. Over centuries, inquisitors amassed thousands of dossiers, personal letters, witness affidavits, confessions wrung under threat, and bishopric directives, each meticulously recorded in Latin on brittle vellum and stored in unmarked chests. The earliest records begin with the fight against the Cathars in southern France, where the Inquisition's dual mandate emerged: to extract confessions through theological disputation and, failing that, to mete out secular punishments in concert with local magistrates. Yet, as the centuries passed, the scope of inquiry widened. Heresies, real and imagined, witchcraft, blasphemy, Judaizing, Lutheran pamphleteering found their way into inquisitorial dockets. Each file follows a chilling pattern: A suspect named, neighbors pressed for testimony, interrogators citing scripture and canon law, and the final verdict handed down in a sealed decree. Those spared execution often endured lifelong penance, imprisonment, branding, or forced pilgrimage. What remains hidden in Vatican vaults are the redacted portions of these files, references to secret informants, papal instructions to moderate sentences when political expediency demanded it, and passages struck through by later prefects seeking to erase the Church's more shameful judgments. Scholars who have gained rare access speak of codices whose margins teem with annotations, corrections in a secretary's hand, cruciform doodles born of despair, and occasional pleas for mercy inscribed in trembling script. In one famous case, the original transcript of Girolamo Savonarola's trial was overwritten to suppress details of his prophetic condemnations of Rome's corruption, perhaps because even centuries later, those words still resonated too dangerously. The files also contain lost confessions of great figures, scholars accused of heretical speculation, cardinals suspected of Masonic leanings, and artists whose depictions of the divine strayed into forbidden realism. A fragment of Bernini's own correspondence survives only as a palimpsest beneath inquisitorial notes, suggesting that even geniuses navigated the fine line between sanctioned creativity and suspected sedition. Inquisitors kept secret registers of dangerous ideas, treatises on cosmic plurality, mystical unions with the divine, and radical social critiques, all deemed threats to the Church's temporal and spiritual hegemony. Modern Vatican policy permits only selected scholars to view Inquisition documents from before 1750, and only under strict supervision. Requests for more recent files are met with polite refusal or indefinite delay. This selective disclosure has fueled debates over historical accountability. How many tragedies could have been mitigated had moderating voices within the Church prevailed? How many innovations cast aside because their proponents were branded heretics? The Inquisition files, in their silent vigil, hold the answer sand, the shame of centuries. Yet even as the Church moves slowly toward transparency, digitizing registers and publishing indexes, the heart of these archives remains dark. Behind the seals rest the raw materials of fear and power, the testimonies that built and at times nearly broke the Roman institution. In these pages, one can trace the alchemy of authority, how doctrine was forged in the fires of persecution, how loyalty was enforced through terror, and how, in the twilight of human remorse, the lines between orthodoxy and oppression blurred beyond clear recognition. The Inquisition files are not relics of a distant past, but living shadows that inform the modern Church's struggle with dissent, reform, and the legacy of silence. To unlock them fully would be to cast a searching light on the darkest corners of faith's history, reckoning still unfolding beneath the vaulted ceilings of St. Peter's. Beneath the learned calm of Vatican libraries and the solemn decree of papal bulls, there lies another tradition that embraces both the empirical and the arcane, where telescopes stand alongside talismans and herbals mingle with grimoires. From the earliest centuries of Christendom, churchmen have walked a fine line between science and sorcery, preserving the promise of human reason, even as they guarded against its most dangerous offshoots. Long before Galileo's trial cast a shadow over Rome's intellectual life, the Vatican had sponsored astronomical observation. Papal astronomers charted the motions of Jupiter and Saturn, believing the harmony of the spheres reflected the order of divine governance. Manuscript volumes, some now sealed in the secret archives, record medieval star charts, tables of eclipses, and commentaries on Ptolemy. Yet alongside these scientific texts lay manuscripts on natural magic, recipes for elixirs to heal plague-racked cities, instructions for crafting protective amulets, and treatises on the occult virtues of stones and plants. These works were not viewed as heretical, but as practical aids to pastoral care, remedies for body and soul alike. The intersection of faith and experimentation reached a dramatic apex in the trial of Giordano Bruno, the Capuchin friar turned cosmologist who dared to proclaim an infinite universe. Bruno's lectures in Rome had once captivated learned circles, his bold vision suggesting stars beyond the firmament and worlds without end. Yet his willingness to blend Hermetic philosophy with scriptural exegesis, drawing on the Corpus Hermeticum and hidden texts preserved by Vatican librarians, eventually put him beyond the bounds of tolerance. The Church, uncertain where to place him, condemned Bruno not solely for his cosmic speculations, but for the alchemical and magical texts he circulated among students. His execution in 1600 signaled the boundary between sanctioned science and forbidden arts, a boundary still policed in the vaults beneath the Vatican. Within those vaults, fragments remain of alchemical laboratories once maintained by Renaissance popes. Giorgio Vasari recorded a papal commission to distill elixir of life from mercury and plant essences, machinery hidden behind secret panels in the Belvedere Palace. Other records speak of secret gardens where Clement VII cultivated the rose that never fades, a botanical wonder said to cure demonic possession. These experiments skirted the edge of orthodoxy, embraced for their promise to heal the faithful, but concealed when their methods smacked too strongly of Hermes Trismegistus. Medicine, too, owes much to these hidden archives. Early papal physicians compiled compendia of materia medica, compilations of Arabian, Greek, and Galenic wisdom enriched by monastic herbalists. Yet alongside lavender and willow bark, these collections included nightshade, mandrake, and other plants whose reputed effects on the soul invited suspicion. Recipes for angel's breath and devil's draught survive only as ghostly palimpsests, their margins crossed out by later officials anxious to distance the Church from anything resembling witchcraft. Through the Enlightenment and into the modern era, the Vatican maintained a delicate détente with emergent science. Jesuit observatories charted comets and solar eclipses, even as the Holy Office censured heliocentrism. The Vatican's botanical gardens introduced exotic species from the New World, cataloged for their medicinal potential, but sometimes feared for their hallucinogenic properties. In the early 20th century, clandestine scholars within the Pontifical Academy of Sciences studied parapsychology, investigating reported miracles and phenomena inexplicable by conventional means. Their reports, filed under lock and key, detail seance transcripts, accounts of levitation, and apparitions data the Church deemed too volatile for general release. What the Vatican keeps locked away in this realm is not simply a record of curiosities, but a chronicle of its own ambivalence. Science offered the promise of mastery over nature, magic the lure of ultimate understanding. The Church embraced both, but held them at arm's length, allowing experimentation so long as it served spiritual ends, then retracting permission when it threatened to eclipse doctrine. The resulting archives contain the residues of that tension: lab notes coated in wax, marginal diagrams of planetary talismans, and letters pleading for guidance from cardinals intrigued by the promise of alchemical gold. In the hushed corridors of the Vatican today, the echoes of ancient secrets meet the rumble of 21st century intrigue. While papal decrees and solemn declarations occupy the public stage, a parallel narrative unfolds behind closed doors, a tapestry woven from prophetic warnings, financial entanglements, and even whispered encounters with the unexplained. These are the modern mysteries and cover-ups that the Vatican continues to guard, revealing how an institution steeped in millennia of tradition navigates a world driven by media, politics, and technology. Perhaps the most famous of these is the saga of Fatima. In 1917, 3 shepherd children in Portugal reported visions of the Virgin Mary, entrusted with 3 prophetic secrets. 2 were revealed in the 20th century visions of hell and warnings of war. But the 3rd secret, long withheld in the Vatican's secret archives, was the subject of feverish speculation. A cryptic text said to prophesy turmoil within the church itself, the martyrdom of a bishop in white, and a period of darkness for humanity. When Pope John Paul II authorized its release in 2000, the brief, allegorical text left many unsatisfied. Convinced that a fuller version remains locked away, its true implications too destabilizing for the faithful. The Vatican's financial dealings form another tangled web. The Institute for the Works of Religion, commonly dubbed the Vatican Bank, has weathered scandals from money laundering allegations to insider trading claims. Though popes and cardinals insist on reforms appointing lay auditors, publishing annual reports, the most sensitive files remain sealed. Secret agreements with governments, offshore holdings, and covert investments in real estate and the art market hint at a shadow empire beneath the holy veneer. Each leak, whether through investigative journalists or internal whistleblowers, followed by swift ecclesiastical investigations cloaked in the language of pastoral concern, rarely yielding public accountability. Beyond the realms of politics and prophecy lies the Vatican's alleged fascination with the unexplained. Rumors persist that the Holy See maintains dossiers on UFO sightings, exopolitical correspondence, and alleged encounters between clergy and unidentified aerial phenomena. In 1978, Pope John Paul I's sudden death after just 33 days in office fueled conspiracy theories of suppressed testimonium, claiming he planned to reveal these extraterrestrial files. More recently, a small cadre of clerics and theologians has advocated for an official church position on cosmic pluralism, stirring debate over the theological implications of intelligent life beyond Earth. Yet any formal discussion remains muted, confined to academic journals and private symposia. The Vatican also holds secrets regarding clerical misconduct. While public apologies and Vatican tribunals address cases of sexual abuse, the full scope of historical cover-ups spans centuries, with bishops shielding offenders, local files disappearing, and victims silenced by ecclesiastical orders. Efforts at transparency, handing dossiers to civil authorities, convening independent commissions, have made progress. But many diocesan and religious order archives remain off-limits, their contents a matter of painful conjecture. Finally, the Church's diplomatic archives contain secret treaties with regimes both friendly and hostile, concordats with totalitarian states in the 20th century, pacts with colonial powers, and discreet negotiations with modern governments over religious education and property rights, all rest behind iron doors. These documents expose the Vatican's dual role as spiritual shepherd and geopolitical actor, balancing moral principles with the art of statecraft attention that demands discretion, lest the faithful question the Church's commitment to justice. In each of these modern mysteries, the pattern is the same. The Vatican chooses which truths to reveal, which to delay, and which to conceal entirely. Behind every papal statement, every televised mass, lies a vault of unanswered questions, prophetic warnings half told, financial ledgers sealed, otherworldly dossiers untouched, and painful histories left to the shadows. To unlock these secrets would be to rewrite the narrative of an institution that has long shaped the moral and political contours of the world. And yet, Just as in the earliest centuries, the walls of secrecy serve both to protect and to perplex. They preserve an aura of mystery that sustains the Church's spiritual authority, even as they provoke skepticism in an age of information. The Vatican's hidden vaults remain the last frontier of faith's interplay, with power-silent sentinels guarding the threshold between the sacred and the profane in an increasingly transparent world. Behind St. Peter's shimmering mosaics and beneath the hush of Gregorian chant lies a world of hidden corridors, locked vaults, and ancient tomes whose contents could rewrite history, theology, and the very architecture of belief. From Gnostic gospels buried in desert sands to alchemical scrolls penned in Byzantine script, from papal relics said to channel divine power to Inquisition files chronicling fear and redemption, from secret rites in shadowed chapels to modern dossiers on Fatima, finance, and phenomena beyond this world, the Vatican's archives stand as both fortress and confession. Why does the Church guard these secrets? Because power lives in mystery, and mystery demands stewardship. Some truths could fracture faith if revealed too soon. Some artifacts bear forces too potent for casual hands. Some histories carry wounds that only time and discernment can heal. The Vatican's gates are not merely barriers, but threshold keepers, ensuring that revelation unfolds within the careful rhythms of tradition and conscience. Yet the very act of concealment raises the question, what is authority without accountability? In an age of transparency, the Church's hidden vaults challenge us to ask not only what lies locked away, but why and at what cost. They remind us that belief, like power, is never static. It must be renewed, questioned, and sometimes laid bare. As you ponder these hidden chambers, consider the broader lesson. Every institution, every tradition, every individual carries vaults of secret sorrows and concealed hopes. To seek truth is to hold a key under your own altar, an invitation to uncover what has been hidden, to face the weight of forgotten knowledge, and to temper authority with humility. The Vatican's secrets, in their silence, teach a final paradox: that genuine faith thrives not in the absence of mystery, but in the courage to embrace it, to interrogate it, and ultimately to let it guide us toward deeper understanding. The true treasure is not the scrolls themselves, but the questions they awaken and the light we find when we dare to open the doors